A house of cards, Trump's tariff gamble, and the $6.40 trillion crash. The American economy shuddered, a tremor, then a freefall. $6.4 trillion vanished from the stock market in 48 hours. This wasn't some rogue algorithm or a natural disaster. This was self-inflicted. This was the price of President Trump's trade war. The tariffs, once a distant threat, had become a harsh reality, and the market responded with a resounding crash. Retirement accounts dwindled, investors panicked. The world watched as the financial system teetered on the brink. The tariffs, meant to protect American jobs, had backfired. Instead of bolstering domestic industry, they had triggered a chain reaction of uncertainty and fear. Companies, once eager to invest and expand, slammed the brakes on growth. Consumers, facing rising prices, tightened their belts. The promise of economic revival had morphed into a specter of recession. This wasn't just about numbers on a screen. This was about real people, real lives. The family struggling to put food on the table as grocery bills soared. The college graduates staring at a mountain of debt, their job prospects dimmed by a shrinking economy. The retiree watching their life savings evaporate, their golden years tarnished by financial insecurity. The $6.4 trillion loss was a stark reminder. Economic stability is fragile. Trump's gamble had shaken the foundations of the global market, and the aftershocks would be felt for years to come. The tariff tightrope, a timeline of escalation and retaliation. The seeds of the trade war were sown long before the market crash. They began with a whisper, a campaign promise to make America great again by bringing back manufacturing jobs and shrinking the trade deficit. Then came the tariffs, a steady drumbeat of escalating duties on goods from China. First, a 10% tariff in February, followed by another 10% in March. Then, a dramatic leap to 34% the following week. Trump, convinced that China was exploiting the United States, threatened to push tariffs as high as 104%. The message was clear. America was done playing nice. China, however, refused to be bullied. Retaliation was swift and sharp. A 34% tariff on all U.S. goods slammed into American businesses, raising costs and disrupting supply chains. Then came a blow to the heart of American innovation, restrictions on rare earth minerals, essential components in everything from smartphones to electric cars. The trade war had become a dangerous game of chicken, each side escalating tensions, raising the stakes, and pushing the global economy closer to the brink. The 90-day pause announced by Trump on April 9th, reducing tariffs to 10%, except for China, which remained at 125%, offered a glimmer of hope. A chance to step back from the precipice. But the damage had been done. Trust had been eroded, and the path to reconciliation remained treacherous and uncertain. The price of protectionism, how tariffs stung American consumers. The grocery store aisles, once familiar and comforting, became a source of anxiety for many Americans. Prices, once stable, seemed to climb higher with each passing week. The cost of everyday necessities, milk, bread, eggs, inched upward, stretching already tight budgets to the breaking point. The tariffs, touted as a way to protect American jobs, had instead ignited a firestorm of inflation. The cost of imported goods from clothing to electronics soared as tariffs kicked in. Domestic producers, sensing an opportunity, raised their prices as well. Consumers, caught in the crossfire, faced an impossible choice: cut back on essentials or deplete their savings. The pain extended beyond the checkout line. Unemployment, once steadily declining, began to tick upward. Companies, squeezed by rising input costs and dwindling demand, were forced to lay off workers. Factories idled, construction projects stalled, and the economy sputtered, starved of the consumer spending that fueled its growth. The promise of prosperity had curdled into a bitter reality. The tariffs, intended to shield American workers, had instead exposed them to the harsh winds of global trade wars. The American dream, once within reach for many, seemed to slip further away with each passing day. Section 4, China Bites Back, a Trade War's Technological Fallout. The tech industry, a beacon of American innovation and economic might, found itself caught in the crosshairs of the trade war. China, home to a vast manufacturing base and a burgeoning tech sector of its own, retaliated with precision, targeting the lifeblood of American technological dominance: rare earth minerals. These minerals, with names like neodymium and dysprosium, are essential components in everything from smartphones and laptops to electric vehicles and wind turbines. China, which controls the lion's share of global production, imposed export restrictions, sending shockwaves through the American tech sector. Prices for these critical materials soared, throwing supply chains into disarray. Companies like Apple, Tesla, and Google, reliant on a steady stream of rare earths from China, scrambled to find alternative sources. The trade war, once a distant rumble, had become a clear and present danger to American technological leadership. The restrictions on rare earths were just the tip of the iceberg. China, determined to assert its growing economic clout, retaliated on multiple fronts. Tariffs on American soybeans crippled farmers. Restrictions on tourism squeezed the hospitality industry. The message was clear: China was a force to be reckoned with, and it would not back down from a trade fight. Section 5. Voices of dissent. From Wall Street to Washington, criticism mounts. The chorus of disapproval was swift and deafening. From the hallowed halls of Congress to the gleaming towers of Wall Street, voices of dissent rose to challenge the wisdom of Trump's trade war. Politicians, economists, and business leaders alike warned of the unintended consequences, predicting economic turmoil and geopolitical instability. Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, warned that the tariffs were starting to hurt the economy. Senator Elizabeth Warren, a frequent critic of Trump's economic policies, called the trade war a disaster for American families and businesses. Even Elon Musk, once a supporter of Trump's tax cuts, broke ranks, urging the president to reconsider his approach to trade. The Senate, in a rare bipartisan rebuke, passed a resolution blocking Trump's proposed tariffs on Canadian imports. The vote, 51-48, underscored the growing unease with the president's go-it-alone approach to trade policy. 4 Republicans, sensing the shifting political winds, joined Democrats in a stinging rebuke of the administration's trade war. The message was clear: Trump's tariff strategy was deeply unpopular, not just among traditional opponents but also within his own party. The president, once lauded for his business acumen, was now facing a crisis of confidence, his economic stewardship called into question by a growing chorus of critics. The Trump administration championed an economic agenda built on bold promises. Tax cuts for corporations, deregulation, and aggressive trade tactics were touted as the recipe for American prosperity. These policies, however, have unleashed a wave of unintended consequences, leaving many economists and everyday Americans grappling with their true costs. Instead of the promised boom, the nation faces a precarious economic landscape characterized by growing inequality, trade wars, and uncertainty. Trump's signature achievement, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, dramatically slashed the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. This move, while welcomed by big business, has done little to boost wages or create jobs as promised. Instead, corporations have primarily used these windfalls to engage in stock buybacks, enriching shareholders and executives while leaving workers behind. This short-sighted approach has exacerbated income inequality, further dividing the haves and have-nots in America. Adding fuel to the fire are Trump's aggressive trade policies, most notably the trade war with China. The imposition of tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods has disrupted global supply chains and raised prices for consumers and businesses alike. These tariffs, far from protecting American jobs, have actually hurt American businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises that rely on global trade. The consequences of these policies are now being felt across the country. From farmers struggling to sell their crops to manufacturers facing increased costs, the economic pain is real and widespread. The question now is whether the Trump administration will acknowledge the shortcomings of its policies and chart a new course. The answer, like the future of the American economy, remains uncertain. The theory of trickle-down economics has long been a cornerstone of conservative economic policy. The idea is simple: cut taxes for corporations and the wealthy, and the benefits will trickle down to the rest of the population in the form of job creation and economic growth. However, the reality of trickle-down economics has repeatedly fallen short of its promises. The Trump administration's embrace of this theory is a prime example. The 2017 tax cuts, heavily skewed towards corporations and the wealthiest Americans, were sold on the premise that they would unleash an economic boom. However, instead of investing in new plants, equipment, and jobs, corporations have largely used their tax savings to buy back their own stock. This practice, while beneficial for shareholders and executives, does little to stimulate the broader economy. Meanwhile, the promised wage growth for average workers has failed to materialize. While some companies initially offered bonuses or modest wage increases, these have largely been offset by rising healthcare costs and the overall increase in the cost of living. The result is a widening gap between the rich and the poor, with the benefits of economic growth increasingly concentrated at the top. This trend has not gone unnoticed. Economists, policymakers, and even some business leaders are now questioning the efficacy of trickle-down economics. The evidence is clear. Simply cutting taxes for the wealthy does not guarantee economic prosperity for all. A more sustainable and equitable economic model requires a more balanced approach, one that invests in education, infrastructure, and policies that support working families. Trump's America First trade agenda, characterized by tariffs and aggressive trade negotiations, has upended decades of global trade norms. While the stated goal of these policies is to protect American jobs and industries from foreign competition, the reality on the ground is far more complex. In fact, many American corporations, particularly those with global supply chains, are finding themselves caught in the crossfire of this trade war. The tariffs imposed on Chinese imports, for example, have had a ripple effect throughout the American economy. Manufacturers, forced to pay higher prices for raw materials and components, have seen their costs rise, squeezing profit margins and forcing some to raise prices for consumers. This, in turn, has dampened consumer demand, creating a drag on economic growth. Moreover, the tariffs have sparked retaliatory measures from trading partners like China, Canada, and the European Union. These retaliatory tariffs have targeted key American exports, such as agricultural products and manufactured goods, hurting American farmers and businesses that rely on international markets. The result is a lose-lose situation, with both sides experiencing economic pain. The uncertainty surrounding trade policy has also had a chilling effect on business investment. Companies are hesitant to make long-term investments in new plants and equipment when the rules of the game keep changing. This uncertainty further undermines economic growth and job creation. The trade war, far from bringing back manufacturing jobs to America, is instead pushing businesses to explore alternative sourcing options outside of the United States, further eroding the country's manufacturing base. Section 4. Empty shelves and shrinking wallets. The impact on small businesses and consumers. While the headlines often focus on the impact of tariffs on large corporations, it is small businesses and consumers who are bearing the brunt of the trade war's fallout. Small businesses, often operating on thin margins, are particularly vulnerable to the rising costs associated with tariffs. These businesses, lacking the leverage of their larger counterparts, are often unable to pass on these increased costs to consumers and are forced to absorb them, eating into their profits and jeopardizing their viability. For consumers, the tariffs translate into higher prices for everyday goods, from groceries and clothing to cars and appliances. This increase in the cost of living is putting a strain on household budgets, leaving families with less disposable income and forcing them to make difficult choices. The tariff's impact is felt most acutely by low and middle-income families, who spend a larger proportion of their income on basic necessities. The trade war's impact on the agricultural sector is particularly illustrative of the challenges faced by small businesses and consumers alike. Farmers, already grappling with low commodity prices and volatile weather patterns, have been hit hard by retaliatory tariffs imposed by China on American agricultural exports. These tariffs have led to a glut of unsold crops, depressing prices and pushing many farmers to the brink of financial ruin. The pain is also being felt by consumers who are seeing the prices of staple foods like soybeans, corn, and pork rise at the grocery checkout. This increase in food prices is particularly concerning given the already high levels of food insecurity in the United States. The trade war, far from benefiting American workers and consumers, is instead exacerbating economic inequality and putting a strain on families across the country. Section 5. Can Trump change course? The uncertain future of the American economy. As America grapples with the consequences of Trump's economic policies, a crucial question emerges. Can the administration change course and steer the economy towards a more sustainable and equitable path? The answer remains uncertain, shrouded in the unpredictable nature of Trump's decision-making process and the complex geopolitical landscape. The administration, for its part, continues to defend its policies, arguing that the short-term pain is necessary to achieve long-term economic gains. However, with each passing day, the evidence mounts that these policies are causing more harm than good. The trade war, far from bringing back manufacturing jobs, is instead pushing businesses to relocate overseas, further hollowing out the American industrial base. The tax cuts, while enriching corporations and the wealthy, have done little to boost wages or address the growing income inequality that plagues the nation. The public, meanwhile, is growing increasingly restless. Polls show that a majority of Americans now disapprove of Trump's handling of the economy, and there is a growing sense that the country is headed in the wrong direction. Protests against economic inequality and the administration's policies are becoming more frequent. Whether this growing discontent will translate into concrete policy changes remains to be seen. The Trump administration has shown a remarkable ability to double down on its policies, even in the face of mounting evidence to the contrary. However, the political calculus may be changing as the 2024 election cycle approaches. With the economy emerging as a key issue for voters, the administration may feel pressure to make concessions in order to shore up support. The future of the American economy hangs in the balance. Will the Trump administration continue down its current path, or will it chart a new course that prioritizes the well-being of all Americans? The answer to this question will have profound implications for generations to come. The American economy is in a state of crisis. The stock market, once a symbol of American prosperity, is crashing. The numbers are stark and frightening. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has plummeted over 10,000 points in a matter of days. The S&P 500, a broader measure of the market, is down over 30%. Trillions of dollars in wealth have vanished. Retirement accounts are decimated. The losses are felt globally. The Nikkei in Japan, the FTSE in London, the Hang Seng in Hong Kong, all are in freefall. The cause of this panic? A trade war ignited by the President of the United States. The fear is palpable. Investors are selling off stocks, desperate to cut their losses. Businesses are delaying investments, uncertain about the future. Consumers are holding back on spending, worried about their jobs. The economy is grinding to a halt. This is not a typical market correction. This is a full-blown crisis, driven by a series of reckless and ill-conceived policies. The president, however, remains defiant. He dismisses the concerns of economists and business leaders. He claims that the market is rigged, and that this is all part of his plan to make America great again. But the American people are not buying it. They see their savings evaporate, they see their jobs disappear, they see their future slipping away, and they are angry. The president's weapon of choice in this trade war? Tariffs. He has slapped tariffs on goods imported from China, Mexico, Canada, and the European Union. These tariffs are essentially taxes on American consumers and businesses. They have driven up the cost of everything from cars to washing machines to soybeans. The impact has been immediate and devastating. Businesses, large and small, are struggling to cope with the increased costs. Many have been forced to raise prices, passing the pain along to consumers. Others have had to lay off workers or even close their doors altogether. The president argues that these tariffs are necessary to protect American jobs and industries from unfair foreign competition. He claims that they will force other countries to make concessions and give American businesses an advantage. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The tariffs have backfired, hurting the very people they were supposed to help. They have raised prices for consumers, cost jobs, and damaged the economy. The president's tariffs have not gone unanswered. Countries around the world have retaliated with tariffs of their own, targeting American products like soybeans, bourbon, and motorcycles. This tit-for-tat escalation has created a climate of uncertainty and fear in the global economy. The European Union, Canada, and Mexico have all imposed retaliatory tariffs on billions of dollars worth of American goods. China, the world's second-largest economy, has responded in kind, slapping tariffs on American soybeans, cars, and other products. This trade war is hurting everyone. It is disrupting global supply chains, driving up prices for consumers, and slowing economic growth. The International Monetary Fund has warned that the trade war could shave 0.5% off global GDP growth by 2020. Section 4. Unrest on Main Street. Across America, people are feeling the pain. Farmers are struggling to sell their crops as foreign markets dry up. Factory workers are being laid off as manufacturing slows. Small business owners are closing their doors, unable to cope with the rising costs. Protests have erupted in cities and towns across the country. Farmers have driven their tractors to Washington, D.C. to protest the tariffs. Factory workers have marched on picket lines, demanding relief. Small business owners have spoken out, warning of the dire consequences of the trade war. The president's response? He has dismissed the protesters as paid actors and enemies of the people. He has continued to insist that his tariffs are working, even as the evidence mounts to the contrary. Section 5. Detachment on the golf course. While the economy teeters on the brink and Americans struggle to make ends meet, the president has appeared detached and unconcerned. He has spent his weekends golfing at his luxury resorts, seemingly oblivious to the suffering his policies have caused. His public statements have been a mix of bluster and denial. He has alternately claimed that the trade war is easy to win and that it is not a trade war at all. He has blamed everyone but himself for the economic damage, from the Federal Reserve, to the media, to China. His behavior has been a study in narcissism and indifference. He seems more concerned with his own image and his own personal victories than with the well-being of the American people. Section 6. The American Dream, Deferred. For generations, Americans have believed in the promise of upward mobility. They have worked hard, played by the rules, and trusted that their children would have a better life than they did. But the trade war is threatening to shatter that dream. The tariffs are hitting American families hard. They are paying more for everyday goods, from groceries to clothing to appliances. They are seeing their retirement savings dwindle as the stock market tumbles. And they are worried about their jobs as the economy slows. The American dream is becoming increasingly out of reach for millions of Americans. The trade war is exacerbating income inequality and making it harder for working families to get ahead. Section 7. A Legacy of Debt. The president's trade war is not just a moral failure, it is an economic disaster. It is leaving a legacy of debt, division, and distrust that will take years to repair. The tariffs are driving up the national debt, which is already at record levels. They are dividing Americans along political and economic lines, and they are eroding trust in American leadership around the world. The president's trade war is a colossal blunder, a reckless gamble that has backfired spectacularly. It is a stain on his presidency and a tragedy for the American people. Friends, gather around. Tonight we're diving headfirst into the chaotic, confusing, and frankly baffling world of Trump's tariffs. Buckle up because this is a wild ride. Picture this, a president convinced he's a master negotiator slapping tariffs on goods left and right. His weapon of choice, taxes on imports designed to protect American industries and bring back jobs. Sounds simple, right? Well, folks, as with most things Trump touches, the reality is far messier, much like a 2-year-old let loose with a bowl of spaghetti. Trump's tariff policy, launched with much fanfare and bravado, promised to revitalize American manufacturing and stick it to China. It was a cornerstone of his America First agenda, a rallying cry for his base. But did it deliver on its lofty promises? Or did it leave the American economy, and indeed the world, in a state of disarray? Tonight, we'll sift through the wreckage, separate fact from fiction, and try to understand the true legacy of Trump's tariff tango. One of the most immediate and tangible impacts of Trump's tariffs has been on the price of consumer goods. Remember when you could buy a washing machine without having to remortgage your house? Those were the days. From cars to electronics to everyday household items, the cost of living in Trump's America has skyrocketed, thanks in no small part to his trade wars. Take, for instance, the humble washing machine. In 2018, Trump slapped tariffs on imported washing machines, hoping to boost domestic production. The result? Washing machine prices shot up by almost 20%. So, while a few more Americans might have found jobs assembling washing machines, millions more were suddenly forced to choose between clean clothes and putting food on the table. And it's not just washing machines. Steel and aluminum tariffs, another Trump favorite, have driven up the cost of everything from cars to beer. The agricultural sector, once a supposed beneficiary of Trump's trade policies, has also been hit hard by the tariff wars. Remember those soybean farmers who were promised riches beyond their wildest dreams? Turns out, China, their biggest customer, wasn't too thrilled about being slapped with tariffs. They retaliated with tariffs of their own, effectively shutting out American soybeans and sending the agricultural industry into a tailspin. Farmers, facing mountains of unsold crops, were forced to rely on government bailouts, a bitter pill to swallow for an industry that prides itself on self-reliance. Unsurprisingly, Trump's tariff policy has sparked fierce debate among economists and policy wonks. On one side, you have the pro-tariff camp led by Trump loyalists like Larry Kudlow and Peter Navarro. These are the guys who believe that tariffs are the magic bullet, the silver sword that will slay the dragon of unfair trade practices and restore America to its former glory. They argue that tariffs are necessary to protect American jobs, level the playing field with China, and bring back manufacturing to the U.S. They point to historical examples like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 as evidence that tariffs can work. Of course, they conveniently forget to mention that the Smoot-Hawley Act is widely blamed for exacerbating the Great Depression. On the other side of the ring, you have the anti-tariff contingent, a diverse group of economists, business leaders, and even some Republicans who believe that tariffs are, to put it mildly, a terrible idea. They argue that tariffs are nothing more than a tax on American consumers, driving up prices and hurting the economy. They point out that tariffs rarely achieve their intended goals, often leading to retaliation from trading partners and harming the very industries they are supposed to protect. Paul Krugman, a Nobel laureate and frequent Trump critic, has called tariffs voodoo economics, arguing that they are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how trade works. Section 4, Economic Tremors, Gas Prices, Market Jitters, and the Canadian Connection. The economic consequences of Trump's tariffs have been felt far and wide, from the gas pump to the stock market. Remember when Trump promised to make America great again? Well, he forgot to mention that greatness would come at the cost of soaring gas prices. In 2019, after Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, gas prices spiked across the country. Motorists were outraged, economists were flummoxed, and Trump, in a moment of breathtaking obliviousness, tweeted about Liberation Day, seemingly celebrating the pain at the pump. The stock market, that fickle beast, has also reacted nervously to Trump's trade wars. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a key indicator of market health, has experienced wild swings in response to tariff announcements and trade negotiations. Businesses, facing uncertainty and rising costs, have delayed investments and put expansion plans on hold. The housing market, already struggling with affordability issues, has cooled further, as rising interest rates and economic uncertainty have made potential home buyers think twice. And then there's Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north, who found themselves on the receiving end of Trump's tariff tirades. Trump, convinced that Canada was somehow stealing American jobs and flooding the U.S. market with cheap aluminum, slapped tariffs on Canadian aluminum imports. Canada, understandably miffed, retaliated with tariffs of their own, targeting American goods ranging from ketchup to bourbon. The trade spat, which dragged on for months, further strained relations between the two countries and highlighted the absurdity of Trump's America First approach to trade. Section 5, Penguins, Arctic Islands, and other tariff curiosities. Now you might think that tariffs, as dry and technical as they may seem, are immune to the kind of absurdity that usually defines the Trump administration. But you'd be wrong. Because in the world of Trump's tariffs, even penguins aren't safe. Yes, you heard that right. Penguins. In 2019, the Trump administration announced tariffs on a range of goods imported from China, including, inexplicably, stuffed penguins. Now, I'm not an expert on international trade, but I'm pretty sure that American children weren't clamoring for cheap Chinese-made stuffed penguins. And I'm even more certain that the Chinese stuffed penguin industry wasn't posing an existential threat to the American economy. But logic, reason, and common sense have never been hallmarks of the Trump administration, so here we are. And if you thought tariffs on penguins were strange, wait till you hear about the Arctic islands. In 2019, Trump reportedly expressed interest in buying Greenland from Denmark. When Denmark politely declined, Trump, in a fit of pique, reportedly considered imposing tariffs on goods imported from Greenland. Now Greenland, for those of you who haven't brushed up on your geography lately, is a largely autonomous territory of Denmark, with a population of around 56,000 people. It's also mostly covered in ice. So, it's unclear what strategic or economic interest the United States might have in imposing tariffs on a sparsely populated, ice-covered island in the Arctic Circle. But then again, with Trump, the absurd is always on the table. Section 6, A World in Retaliation, the global fallout of Trump's trade wars. Trump's tariff tantrum hasn't just alienated allies and confused economists, it's also triggered a wave of retaliation from trading partners around the world. China, the primary target of Trump's trade wars, hasn't taken his tariffs lying down. They've responded with retaliatory tariffs of their own, targeting key American exports like soybeans, pork, and automobiles. The result? A tit-for-tat trade war that has hurt businesses and consumers on both sides of the Pacific. The European Union, another frequent target of Trump's ire, has also hit back with tariffs on American goods, ranging from Harley-Davidson motorcycles to Kentucky bourbon. Even Canada, our closest trading partner and staunch ally, hasn't been spared. The trade disputes, fueled by Trump's protectionist impulses and his penchant for inflammatory rhetoric, have strained relationships and undermined global trade. The long-term consequences of Trump's tariff policy remain to be seen, but the early signs are not encouraging. The trade wars have created uncertainty, increased costs, and disrupted supply chains, hurting businesses and consumers alike. They've also damaged America's reputation as a reliable trading partner, undermining its standing in the world. So there you have it, folks. The tariff tango, a tale of misguided intentions, unintended consequences, and baffling decisions. It's a story that's still being written, but one thing's for sure, we'll all be feeling the effects for years to come.